Hi. My name is Connor McFadden. I am one of the pastors here at the church. I got to tell you, I've been looking forward to this class a lot. And what's fun about it to me is that I get to, sometimes it's in these classes, you just get to do something you don't normally get to do in this capacity. And I really like to spend time on this subject. So I'm excited to talk about it. I want to give you a rundown of what we're going to be doing tonight and just maybe some of the ground rules so we're all on the same page and set the tone in some regard. So I'm going to introduce myself in a second, but today's all about self-awareness. And the thing that I love about self-awareness is that I am a big proponent, and this is something I use time and time again with couples and individuals in counseling or pastoral situations. And it's something when we really understand ourselves, then your life can change quite a bit. But if you don't understand yourself, what tends to happen is you can kind of wreak havoc in relationships, and you have a hard time getting close to people because there's just this lack of awareness. So this topic, to me, I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about it because I see it work. I see people apply this to their lives and see lives change. And so that's what makes me excited about tonight. And some of you I've never met. So it's fun because we may not have crossed paths unless we were here in class together, which is really cool. So my name again, Connor McFadden. I'm a pastor here at the church. Before I came to the church, I actually studied counseling, and I worked in mental health for about 6 years before I came here, and I've been in private practice, kind of moonlighting ever since I've been here. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you and bring up is things that I've learned in counseling settings. So I've seen this play out. I like to bring that out confidentially always, but really bring some of these scenarios out so we can learn from them and go, hey, these are some really important things, because if we get these things right, if we can learn from them, we can really grow, and we can learn a lot from other people. Amen? So because we are a smaller class, here's the opportunity, is that we actually can interact, and you are going to talk in this class, not just to each other, but to me. Let's let that settle in for a moment. When we talk about self-awareness, some people were like, sweet, I'm going to meet a new best friend. And some of you are like, I don't talk. Let that sit. I just don't talk. But part of what we want to do is push that a little bit, because we grow when we're around other people and we experience and we share things together. And so that's part of what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to talk about some things that are crucial we can look at in self-awareness, bring up kind of 6 biggies. There are things we could look to and learn from. I'm going to talk about a few different ways, things that get in the way of us being self-aware. And then I'm also going to talk about just some tips or some things, real practical tools, we're going to end on that, of things anyone could do to be more self-aware. I want to also say this. The stuff that I'm talking to you about tonight are things that I've had to do in my own life. One of the most humbling situations came to me when I just started dating my wife, who's now been my wife for 17 years. Actually, I'll show you a picture. There's Bree McFadden right there. That's Zion in the middle and Rowan on the left. This is a day before we climbed Half Dome. We're at Sentinel Dome right now, and the next day we climbed Half Dome. But 18 years ago, Bree and I started dating. You ever been head over heels for someone? You just love them. You're so infatuated with them, and they drive you crazy at the same time. So much so that Connor, who's at grad school at the time, actually ended up in a counseling office as I'm also studying counseling, marital counseling. And it was the dumbest issue we'd ever fought about. My wife and I, or excuse me, girlfriend at the time, we fought over a present during Christmas, and just the difference of opinion as to what we would get each other. And I would probably spend a half hour on the story. But in that counseling session, the lady said to me something that I'll never forget. She said, why are you focusing on this issue when this is clearly not yours to solve? And it's the first time I thought, oh my gosh, I am lacking. I don't know what is mine. I don't know what Bree's is. And because of that, our first year together was the hardest year of our marriage. And the beautiful thing was, over time, we learned to talk about these things. We learned to open things up. We learned to understand what deep triggers were. And ever since that first year, we really don't fight. It's been 17 years. And the first year that we were together, we fought every week. And a lot of the time she would leave the house and run, get out of there fast. And I couldn't figure it out. And when we started to slow things down and start to look inward, that's when change happens. But here's another important principle. Our lives, everything we're doing, you kind of have two main paradigms. One is external, is that I am a victim of what happens. And my life would be better if this, and this would happen. Don't we get caught in those ways of thinking at times? Like if these things would just go better, I'd be better. And what I want to shift away from is a mindset that we have at times, but one that's internal that says, no matter what happens to me, I'm going to grow. No matter what's happening outside, I'm going to change. No matter what's going on out there, I can actually make a difference because I'm going to focus on the things that I can control. Because where we are today is a result of the choices we have made, not the choices that everyone else has made. And if anyone tells you different, they're robbing you. They're robbing you because we can't have that sort of victim-like mentality that if things would be different, I would be different. No, people go through struggles and hardships and grow and change. And that is something you could hold on to because God can redeem anything. But the key is to understand its impact on your life. So we're going to be talking about having an internal locus of control. That means that I understand what's going on inside here, and because of that, I can change, okay? That's what we're doing. So to cue us off, I'm going to show a picture. We're also going to have some fun tonight, so you could just breathe easy. It's not going to be all seriousness. But I am going to fast forward real quick. This is the epitome of low self-awareness. Has anyone seen this? Any Seinfeld fans? Okay. This is Elaine. Elaine, she's the boss at work, confident. She's trying to rally the troops. She's going to get everyone going, and everyone has a friend like this that lacks the awareness, and people are afraid to tell them they're not as cool as they think they are. So this is Elaine. I'll let the clip tell the rest of the story, but she's at the work party trying to get things going. Here we go.
Hey guys, I want to make a toast. Here's to those who wish us well, and those who don't can go to hell. All right, who's dancing? Come on, who's dancing? You want me to get it started? I'll get it started.
Sweet, fancy Moses. Elaine, dance.
It's more like a full-body dry heave. Set the music.
Did she do the little kicks and the thumbs?
What, you mean you know about this?
For some time. It was about 5 years ago. I never knew what to say to her about it. It was one of those problems I hope would just go away.
Well, sometimes you can't help these people till they hit rock bottom.
And by then, you've lost interest.
Completely lost respect for me.
How could that be?
Well, Jerry, I mean, it's like the feeling is palpable.
Hey guys.
Okay, there you go. That one's rough. Apologize for the curse, too. But anyway, here's what I want to do as a group. I love David's psalm here. David's actually angry when he writes this. And yet we could pull some of this. This is a great example of what it means to be self-aware, to be very honest. And so here's what I want you to do. It's just we're going to pull some of the action steps out of here together. What do you see as an important, integral part of self-awareness in this? Let me read it. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and see my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. pull parts that could really lead David's attempt to be, in a way, self-aware, to be introspective. He's seeking inward. He's asked for God's help. What stands out to you in terms of really David's attempt to do that? He's anxious. Okay. So we know he's anxious. What else? Surrender. Okay, what else? Openness. Why is that so important? That's how he's going to change. Okay, what else? Okay, why is that so important? Okay, sometimes we don't know what to do. Sure. What else? Why is that important?
Put me on the spot. Because if we're not open to that, then we're closed off to what he has in mind for us.
Okay, for sure. Search me. Look at these action steps. And here's the important thing. This takes incredible amount of vulnerability, does it not? To say we don't have all the answers. Search me and know my heart, so much so, test me, know my anxiety. We know, like you said, Ricardo, that he's anxious. See if there is any offensive way in me. Like literally clean this part out and then do what? Lead me in a new way. And this is why we're talking about self-awareness. God, I don't have it figured out right now. I may be way off. I could be so wrong. I want to be open to you. And sometimes that's through other people. Will you test this out? Will you seek inside of me? Will you test my heart? Will you know my thoughts? And then will you lead me in a new way? But if we don't stop to even pray this prayer, to ask this question, then there is no other way. And one of the most heartbreaking things is to interact with someone who's been stuck for years and years and years without this type of prayer, with this type of ability. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to stop and do. Now, let me tell you why you're my favorite class outside of school ministry, is that you're here on a Monday night at 7 o'clock, a time that I probably wouldn't even be here, because you're here to learn. I just think that speaks so highly of you. And if you do things like this, you will find that you're always learning about yourself, because we are in many ways like a high-performing vehicle. A car takes oil, it takes transmission fluid. We have to check levels, we have to check air. We need to know if there's tire pressures okay. All of those things need constant maintenance to run well, correct? Now, like us, we need constant maintenance. I think God knew this when he saw his creation, is that we're prone to fall backwards most of the time and towards sin if we're not careful. And like that vehicle, we could run a long time with zero maintenance, potentially. But what happens to a vehicle that runs for a long time with zero maintenance? Breaks down. And when it breaks down, is it a small bill or a big one? It's massive. And sometimes that car never runs again. So the way that we, like that vehicle, keep running strong is that we have ways of checking our levels. How am I doing here? How am I feeling? What's going on? Am I doing good as a husband? Am I doing good as a father? Am I doing good as a friend? How's my tire pressure? And that way we keep running strong. But that takes a lot of work, a lot of openness. So here's what I want to do. I want to turn it around. All of you, just for the next, say, 2 minutes, I want you to come up with 3 words to describe yourself. This is an active part of self-awareness. You just go, hey, how would you describe yourself? 3 words, and then we're all going to share them. Surprise, this is going to be a really good time. So take a few minutes. You can't ask the person next to you, how should I describe myself? I want you, how would you describe you? And we're just going to start putting this into practice, because we were talking about earlier, I don't want this just to be a spectator thing. I just get tired of hearing myself talk. In fact, I'd rather we interact a little bit, and this is an important part of that. So I want you to just maybe take just 2 minutes, write 3 words that describe you, because I actually really want to understand you and get to know you, okay? Any questions on that? Okay. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, like, one of them can't be like what we do.
It could be. I'd like you, and that's a good question. I'd like you to maybe go to like a deeper level than that. So I would describe that I think I'm kind of funny. Maybe that's not apparent yet. Maybe that's to be determined. I'm caring. I'm passionate about what I'm doing. Those would probably be 3 words I would use to describe myself. So something along those lines. Okay, go for it. Who's got their word or their words? Who needs more time? You got him? No one needs more time? You can't copy his, Michaela. I think I'm going to notice. I think you guys said the same thing. How's the temp in here? Hot, too cold? It's cold? I feel like I'm so hot up here. Maybe it's under the lights. Okay, let's start with this side of the room. Say your name and your 3 words. Yes, please.
My name is Cindy, and I'm
Giving, loyal, and honest. Okay.
those were the positives.
Oh, boy. That's kind of an ominous thought, isn't it? Like, well, let's stay there. Let's stay with the positives. Want to vote on everyone in favor? Okay, well, we'll stay with those. Okay.
I'm Michaela. I put determined, thoughtful, and outgoing.
Determined, thoughtful, and outgoing. Cool. What would you put?
Jake, I put quote unquote deep or philosophical. I'm indecisive and intimate.
Oh, wow. Million questions popped in my head when you said that, all those 3 things. Okay, next, in the back. Ooh, determined. I like that. Okay.
Sensitive, empathetic, and patient.
Empathy is a huge one, especially in counseling. Great word. Yes. In the front. You want to go? Sorry. Ryan.
I'm Ryan. Outgoing, passionate, fun.
Outgoing, passionate, and fun. Sounds like a good time. Hang out with Ryan more often.
You get a lot of hands sometimes, but if you're tolerant, you'll be all right.
Awesome. And what's your name?
My name is Diane, and I put, not that I'm caring, but I need to care, or I need to help people.
Tell me more. I want to understand.
It bothers me tremendously if persons I know or even don't know need help, and I if I'll
Yes. You know what I'd love, even if there's more time tonight, it'd be great to dive into that. If anyone wants to dive into something, we totally can. Some of those.
If you can help that would really.
Hey, I'm off the clock, so we'll see. No, anything like that could be a great opportunity. We may have some time to do that sort of thing and really dive deep and understand. Okay, yes, in the middle.
My name is Elizabeth, and I put into words for one because I think I choose caring slash empathy.
You're trying to sneak extra words in there.
Okay.
Caring and empathy. Okay, should we give her the extra word? All right, they voted. We're going to give you 4 words.
Okay, I'm putting friendly. We need counseling now.
Okay.
Friendly slash loyal and persistent and compassionate.
Ooh, I like that there's a part of you that really, it was important for you to kind of add that clarification on there, right? Like one word didn't sum it up enough.
Yeah, because I didn't want to give up on the other one because I think I kind of put it in different categories and then I thought,
Yeah,
so I felt like
awesome. That's great. Okay, and your 3 words.
My name's Tim. I said greedy because it was 4 words and I was reading, so that's all that was. I'm funny, helpful, and sometimes moody.
Okay, funny, helpful. A lot of artists are moody.
I'm artistic.
There you go. Okay, in the back.
I'm Corbell, and I did most of my negative, but since we're doing positive, quiet, I'm quiet, caring, and I suppose I'll say one of my negatives, control.
Okay.
My name's Ricardo. I'm controlled. My words are social, patient, and caring.
Cool. How about in the back over there?
I'm Jeff. I put thoughtful, loyal, and family man. Sorry.
Okay.
My first one's hyphenated too. My name's Denise, and I put life learner, reader, and compassionate.
Great. You say reader?
Yeah.
You love to read. You got a good tip for us right now?
Reading?
Yes. A good book recommendation?
I'm reading I read about 15 books at a time. So I do like 15 pages and I put it down. It depends on what it is.
Yes.
Right now I'm reading Upside Down Spirituality by Chadberg. I love it.
Oh, okay. And Meg?
My first one is like a 3-worder.
I love it. Let's just 3-worder. Go for it. Lover of people. Okay.
And I'm loyal and adventurous.
Loyal and adventurous. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Now let me ask you this. Let's peel back the curtain a little bit. How was this, just to even do this type of thing? One, to determine these words. The other part, to share them. What was your experience like over here? Actually, I'm going to go in the front, and then I'll go to you, Michaela. What was that like for you to share that? Because you went first.
a little uneasy.
A little uneasy. Tell me more.
Shy,
Okay.
so not good at talking in front of people.
Okay.
And then it was hard to think. I didn't know if you meant like words, positive, negative. So it was kind of hard to think of positives.
For sure. Michaela, what were you going to say?
Fairly easy.
Okay.
It was hard for me to pick one word. I kept wanting, I put like a dash next to all my
Okay. How about you all here? What was that like? Ryan, what was that like for you?
It's fine. I was comfortable with it.
Comfortable.
It's hard to break it down to just 3 words to describe yourself because you're like, well, that's almost impossible.
Right.
3 words that really encompass who you really are by any means.
For sure.
Maybe 20. Start getting there.
Okay. Next time we'll do 20.
Give a look at list of characteristic traits. There's 100 of them.
Right. Any other observations? Yes.
In listening, it's fun to hear words go, yes,
Right.
But we still have our walls, like I'm private, or, there's a barrier.
I so want to go there right now. We're not going to, but like 3 times you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just perfect. Even when you say wall, as a counselor, it's like, well, let's talk about the wall. We actually will go to a version of walls, but I like the way that you're thinking. The thing we're doing here is really we're trying to live out self-awareness as we're talking, as we're in class, almost like the inception of it is we're talking about it, we're learning about it, and then we're hearing other people do the same thing. And that is a great part of self-awareness, but also takes a little bit of a quiet and separate time to even be self-aware. I'm a busy person. I love to be busy. I like noise. Anyone else work and do PowerPoint or presentations or even study with TV on or music? I almost need it. So you're the opposite. You said no.
But if I have music, then everything's gone. So that means that I'm in the music. You can put TV on.
We are a noise culture is really the point I'm making, is that we have never been more noisy. And things like self-awareness take a little bit of quiet, a little bit of introspection and time. And sometimes things like this are the first to go. So it actually takes time to stop. One thing I'll give you is one of the things I do is I try and drive home with no music on, nothing, and just dedicate 15 minutes to prayer and silence. And oftentimes those are the most creative moments of my day. I'll come up with new thought, new material, because there is a creative side of our brain that is screaming to be used. And we're often operating just this very business sort of brain that just wants to fly, to fight, to flight, to problem solve. It's very matter of fact, very business. There's a whole side of us that we don't normally use because we stopped the practice of doing that. And it takes time and creativity. But when we do that, we stop thinking about what should I do in this urgency versus what's best to do. What's really going on? What do I think is going on? Why is this impacting me? These are all great questions that take time. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to click over. Would you mind? Do you know where our guy is? Do you mind just activating that again? Okay, 6 things to be aware of. Your family wasn't normal, just normal to you. Ryan, why are you smiling right now?
Well, I just got married in July.
Okay.
And I realized that when me and my wife communicate, she will listen till I'm done talking and then she'll speak.
Yes.
And I'm constantly jumping in. And that's the way my family was. We were having a conversation. We'd just be more or less interrupting each other, but interacting back and forth in bits and pieces. Very normal.
Yes.
Not very normal for her. So we're trying to adjust and figure that out. So it seemed normal to me. But
Right.
I realized it's not normal to everyone.
Correct.
Can't imagine why.
Your family wasn't normal, just normal to you. When I first got into mental health, I would do mostly assessments where I sit down with someone who is mentally ill and oftentimes had something like bipolar or depression. We'd spend 2 hours going through assessments. One of the questions that I would always go to is like, tell me about your childhood. And could anyone guess what the most common response was? When I asked, tell me about your childhood, they would say, it was just pretty normal. Pretty normal. 18 years of childhood condensed or broken down or even kind of reduced to one word, normal. But you know what? Your mom wasn't normal, was she? Your dad wasn't really normal. Your siblings weren't really normal. In fact, we often do that. It's kind of normal, but our childhoods weren't really normal. They're just your normal. The reason that's important, like Ryan was saying, is that shapes your expectations for almost everything. That's your normal. So what's your normal? Is it just normal? And so you go, 2 people who go into marriage going, hey, we're both normal. Oh my gosh, it's a disaster waiting to happen. You need to realize, no, we weren't normal. When we start breaking down do away with this word normal and we start really getting to truth and honesty and understanding, going, no, actually, let's discover what our normals were. So here's what I want you to do. Let's just think of, between you, if you're married, single, whatever, what are differences just in when two people from two different normals come together? What are some of the things that could be normal in your family? Or let me give you an example, because I'm struggling to articulate what I'm asking. Things like religion, communication, things like that. What are some of those things that shape your normals that just every marriage has? It's not saying that you have the same, but this is part of what you learned growing up. So what are things like that? Traditions. Okay, what else? Say again? Bullying. Okay, so so it's like the temperature of the house. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just we grew up giving each other, I guess, crap and fighting and stuff like that.
Okay.
That was normal.
Oh.
I got married and I guess that wasn't so normal.
Okay, conflict. Can we put that, Ricardo? Okay, what else? What's funny? Humor. Okay, what else? Communication. What else? Oh, tell me more.
Like I was required to be at dinner at a certain time, and if I missed it, didn't get got in trouble or chores. Just the level of responsibility my parents held me to.
Okay, responsibilities. What else? Yes. Respect. What it looked like. Respect. What else? Actually, here's the word I was looking for earlier. Your norms. Morals. Say again. Faith. Finances. Oh, man. Hierarchy. Yeah? Is that how you spell it? Okay. Family involvement. The thing is, we could have a list of 1,000 norms. Your norms, your norms. When you guys got married, you had norms. And so what happens is you get together with a set of norms that are your normal. And guess what? The other person did not have that set of norms. So let's say for a moment that people in a marriage are lacking self-awareness. They haven't really thought of, well, that's just my dad. This is how we were raised. We say things like that, correct? So let's just say we have a person with lower self-awareness meets another person with lower self-awareness. How do you think that typically goes?
There's a lot of expectations that go unmet.
A lot of unmet expectations. What else? Conflict? For sure. What else? Misunderstanding, frustration, disappointment. This is not, that's not how I saw a dad treat I didn't see a dad do that, or that's not how a wife treats a husband. That's not what I saw. That's not what I learned from my parents. And what happens is people come in with a high hope for marriage and a huge letdown. One of the best things you could do is go, hey, I understand myself so well that I know what I'm bringing to the table. My wife, when I met her, she's fresh off the boat from Utah. We met at Carl Strauss Brewery. She was leaving Mormonism. My in-laws, when I go there, my wife is one of 7. My in-laws are Mormon. My wife was leaving Mormonism, becoming a Christian when I met her. They don't talk about anything. Money, my father-in-law employed his kids as young as like 11 years old. They're just working at a burger joint, making money. And now my nieces and nephews work at the same burger joint, getting paid under the table. You don't talk about that. There's 7 of them. Now, my dad is a MFT. My mom studied social work. Do you think we had some conversations growing up? Oh my gosh. So you either have two families. One, you don't talk about anything at all, or the other one, my version, is you don't leave until you've talked about it. But very early on, these types of things started popping up in marriage. And you know what I wanted to do? I actually wanted to blame Bree. Well, this would go easier if you were just a little bit, it's kind of, whether I said it or not, I want to blame her for all these things. Look at this conflict. Clearly, we should be talking about all of this. Clearly, we should sit in this room and just discuss this until we're done. That's true resolution, right? You know what that made her want to do? Run. You know what she did? Run. One of our first dates, this is just so my mom too. I was thinking about it. We're like at Macaroni Grill. We get the bread. Anyone been to Macaroni Grill? Bread, you got the oil, you have vinegar. And they bring out the bread. I'm like, okay, this is good. We ordered soup and an entree each, and I think even a salad. And on a date, I'm like, all right, she's kind of going a little big, but whatever. She's so beautiful. I'm like, all right, whatever. So the bread comes out. She starts tearing into the bread. I'm like, okay, that's good. She's a healthy eater. It's like 3 pieces in. I'm like, what's going on? Like, we ordered all these appetizers. And I think it was just a comment like, hey, how's that bread treating you? Right? She just stopped. And it got tense. And I'm like, hey, do you think maybe you should not load up on the bread given we ordered? Isn't that kind of a rational comment? No, wait, I see head shaking. Why are you shaking your heads? Why are you shaking your head in the back?
If that was me and I was on a date and a date said that to me, I would probably be like,
What? But it was truth. She's loaded up our bread, right?
Might be really good bread.
I shamed her? Oh my God, you guys, I had no idea. Right? It was just such a rational thing. My mom would be like, don't load up on the bread because we got a whole meal coming. I don't know, anyone's parents say that? Because we talked and we could talk. It shut everything down with her. 1 of 7. When there was food in the fridge or on the table, what did you do? You ate fast. She didn't talk about anything. So these types of things were such a standstill, and guess what? I had no idea. So I would double down. I'd defend my position. I'd rationalize. Well, if you just listen, or we could just talk, because talking is good and you don't want to talk. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. Until we ended up in a counseling office, and finally the lady said to me, why are you saying that, or why are you doing that? Clearly is not yours to work on or fix. Why are you missing this part? And it was the moment that I noticed all my norms, the traditions, these were cemented in me. These were actually absolutes in my mind. This was the right way. This is what you do. My traditions. When I go home to Utah for a week to be with Bree's family every single year, they get together in the morning, and that's it. We're together all day long. We get together in the morning, we talk, we hang, zero plan. We just are together. This drives me nuts. My family, we get together, we go for a run, we get a movie, we make dinner, and everyone goes to bed everyone is gone by like 7. Our family reunions sometimes are 3 hours long. But that's my norm. When 2 norms collide, it needs a lot of self-awareness to say, hey, we may have had norms. This may have been your normal, but it doesn't mean that it's normal. Okay, any questions on that?
Or it doesn't mean that your partner's abnormal.
Sure. So we just went through, what was your normal? Think about it, even in your marriage. What happens, though, the subtle shift here is that you start to make these things okay. It's just, hey, I'm making these okay. This isn't bad stuff. This is just different. Not wrong, but just different. And then as you slowly start to open that up with someone else or even understand that about yourself, now you have a new language of like, oh, this is just our thing. You could talk about it, and it's not a combative thing. It's an awareness thing. We're just different. And then over time, it shifts to it's just funny. Bree and I laugh about that stuff now because it's not living and active like it was before, the conflict, the butting of heads. We actually know this stuff. And then when you know yourself so well, you can safely have someone close to you. Because you know where you begin and where you end and where they begin and where they end, but you don't have that intermixing that's so toxic. So what was your normal communication conflict? How were feelings expressed in your household? So Ricardo, you go home, you tell your dad, I'm just kind of sad right now and I feel like crying. What would he say? You're shaking your head. Why is that?
Because, well, my parents got divorced, so we grew up with my dad, and it was just a bunch of guys, so it was kind of hard to express what you were feeling. So it was just, that's why I said we bullied each other a lot, because that was a way of us letting out a lot of those emotions.
Okay. So you meet Corabelle. Were you allowed to express your feelings growing up? Okay. How did this play out between you two?
A lot of the times when we would get into like conflict and stuff like that, I would just shut down and I wouldn't want to talk about it, or okay, we got into an argument and that was it. You know, I would move on, like they would go on, and she would still want to talk about it, and she would want to get it solved or whatever. So we struggled a lot with that for a while, even now.
Okay. It sounded like you were talking about how you resolve issues. Resolution. Do you want to just move on, or do you want to camp? Do you want to actually unpack it? And sometimes it's hard to sit there and want to just go back to it. You just want to move forward, right?
Yeah, that was my way of, I guess, dealing with it. I was just like, okay, well, we argue about color or whatever, and I was just like,
I want to back it, and he wants to just get it over with.
Okay. So all right, let me ask the class. How do we move forward with this differently in a way that brings maybe just a new way of dealing with these extreme differences between the two? Compromise, what does that look like? Yes. You are now. Will you put on your counselor hat? Right. Here's what I'll say. No matter what the other person is doing, you still lead with what you want people to do. In your parenting, in your marriage, in your friendships, with your family, you still are a powerful mentor and model to other people. And even if someone isn't doing something, you can still lead with what you'd like them to do. It's powerful because you influence every single person you interact with every single day. And if we start leading with that mentality, that's an internal locus of control. I can actually change the world. I can do things to change things, not wait for someone else to change. Wait for you to change, and then I'll change. So remember, you influence actually every single one of you that interacts with someone else. Like all of you I've interacted with today, we've altered the course of our lives just through one interaction. Isn't that a crazy thought? Like I didn't know you before, but now I know you're a memory in my head. I didn't even know you existed until today. Every single person you interact with alters the course of your life. And you have the ability to impact people beyond what you know. But that's not a passive thing. It's actually an active thing. Like I look for opportunities, and no matter what anyone else is doing, I still have a mentality of like, well, I'm still going to move forward in health. I'm still going to move forward in impact. I'm still going to move forward in faith no matter what anyone else is doing. Okay. So next slide, here's what I want to do next. It's kind of a sub-point of your family is attachments. Anyone heard of attachments before? Okay, so attachment study is fascinating. In fact, we learned that a lot of ourselves, a lot of us was shaped very early on, like a framework of a building that's been poured Now, can we build a house on top of it? Absolutely. But our framework was poured very early on, and it was often shaped by the people that cared for us when we were growing up. So it leads to what's called an attachment. So if I have someone that's caring for me, someone who is holding me when I'm crying, what do you think would be some of the feelings that would result from that growing up? What do you think? Safety. What was the other one? Secure. So they did studies like this over time, and they would do studies, and I hate to even bring these up because they're so horrible, but we can actually learn a lot from them. But they would do studies with orphans, and they would leave orphans, and some of them they'd pick up. Other orphans they would let cry, and they wanted to learn how did these orphans attach after these experiments. And what they found is that early on, a secure attachment would alter how someone interacted with people down the line. A secure attachment in a baby, that baby felt like the mom was going to pick it up or a caretaker was going to pick it up. They actually trusted people. I know when I cry, you're going to come get me. That was shaped very early on. Now, what they also found is that some babies, they just let cry. Isn't that awful? You know what that baby learned? Pretty soon they stopped crying. Why would I even cry? Because no one is going to come to check on me. And you could see how that sort of mentality would play out later on in life, right? I could cry or I would say anything, but no one's going to come to me. Why do we even bother? And it was a different style of attachment. Or the type of person that maybe had a parent that was sometimes there, sometimes wasn't, and they learned that in life, sometimes you can count on people, other times you can't, so you're kind of mistrusting. So we could learn a lot about our attachment just thinking back and going to your childhood and asking, hey, how was I raised? What was that safety like as a kid? Because that impacts in some way how I interact with everyone down the line. Did you have a question? Yes.
We have adopted children in institutions.
Okay. So you know what I'm talking about.
But what you're just sharing, if you interface that with Christ and his redemptive healing, right, we can see people healed.
Sure.
Completely healed.
For sure.
So if you're walking, I mean, I hear what you're saying here, but that's to me, it feels like that's apart from Christ or our journey with Christ, right? But as we walk with him and we're listening to him and our ways are changing, right? Then we're identifying and attaching in a new way.
That's exactly the point. If you don't understand your attachment, you will follow it out in relationship, especially some let's go into it. Because the first attachment is secure. So your family wasn't great, but they were a kind of quote unquote normal, right? Mom was around, dad was around. I could relate to a man okay because I know what a dad was like, and my dad was someone encouraging. My mother was pretty secure, and so later on in life, I'm okay in this area. Secure people, they have healthy self-awareness, they're reliable, consistent, they have empathy, trust, they communicate relationship issues well, they seek compromise, not afraid of commitment or dependency. Relationships are easy because early on, that trust was established, correct? So, hey, those things, they're not always perfect, but the framework for that, the foundation was pretty solid. Then we have anxious. Plays games to seek attention or gain interest, wants a lot of closeness, worries about being rejected, struggles to not be in a relationship, has difficulty explaining what bothers them, expect you to guess, can act out, has a hard time not making things about them in the relationship, is preoccupied in relationships, fears that small things will ruin the relationship, suspicious of unfaithfulness and getting hurt. So if it's a little unstable, you can be. Remember, we don't know exactly how it changes your attachment. We just know that when you have instability, it does have an impact. So sometimes, I don't know if you work with a lot of like kids in Haiti, There's a reactive attachment disorder. There's also an inhibited. So when I was down in Haiti, some of those kids didn't even know who I was, and they were latched onto me. So when I was down there working, I always had a kid right next to me. And many times I had 3 or 4 kids, so much so that I actually wanted to take them to the States. Like I felt like these are my babies after a week there. So there's a reactive attachment. There's also an inhibited type, the person who is like, I stay away from everyone because if I stay away, that gives me a little bit of control. You can't hurt me when I'm away. So we don't always know how that impacts. We just know it impacts. So that's anxious. The last one is avoidant, which I was just giving an example of. Sends mixed signals, keeps distance, values independence, devalues you or others, lots of boundaries, fears being taken advantage of, rigid views of relationship, has difficulty talking about what's going on between you. So think about how that could play out for a moment. As you have an anxious person, a person who feels unstable in the relationship, and you have an avoidant person together because initially it was kind of fun, and then it got real. How do you think this could play out? Jake. Okay, Ryan, you want to help him? Add to that? What land are you in? Michaela, do you want to help Jake? Or add to, not that you needed help, I'm saying, do you want to add to what he said?
You're talking about an anxious and an avoidant.
Correct.
The avoidant person's keeping distance. The anxious person wanting to get more anxious and feel more like, are you going to be here for me? Are you leaving me? And then the avoidant person wanting to pull away more. And then have a relationship.
Perfect. So you have a person who's pushing away because they need space. What does the anxious person do? Typically, I move towards. You're pushing away, I'm moving towards. Oh, now I'm moving away. Ooh, I need more space. Ooh, I need to be closer to you. And we see this kind of thing where the person's trying to pursue, the other person's trying to distance, and it drives them nuts, right? So the thing, and what is your name again? Denise. The thing that is so freeing is when you could look at your childhood, you could look at your upbringing and go, you know what, that did impact me, but I don't need to live out the same thing now than I did back then. That in God, we have someone who could lead me in a new way. And that's so important, is that we don't have to have the same attachment style. I will say, as someone who's worked with a lot of clients, this is very hard to overcome, dependent upon how bad it was. So there's a direct correlation with a toxic sort of attachment and how that impacts later in life. It always hits hard, but I've also seen so many people work to overcome that and come so far. But it is a huge process. Now, 2 secure people, they still have their challenges, but there's not a general mistrust. They're not fighting against the same things. So we have a spectrum here. We have 2 main measures. Avoidance, either low or high, and anxiety, low or high. And so you actually could plot where you are on that chart somewhat. And I will say that it's almost embarrassing to say, but I actually scored a little bit on the anxiety part in relationships. So I had a little bit of this higher anxiety, not fully anxious, but was somewhat secure with a little bit of high anxiety. And as I started to look back and really look at that, it was because some of my early framework, like even, from a split home, my whole life, I was one when my parents divorced. I saw a lot of that, so much so that when I got into a relationship, I had a real underlying fear that permeated in the relationship that I was going to get a divorce someday, that person's going to leave. Can you see how that could just color or create some sort of tint to your relationship when you saw that? And that actually you saw more than you saw overcoming. And so these types of things can really play out when your attachments early on are thrown off. And it's super important and even freeing to go back and go, hey, what is that? Could I go back to my quote unquote normal childhood and start unpack things and to ask the question, how did this impact how I viewed a husband and a wife and a mom and a dad? How did my culture teach me that? How is it playing out now? Was this something that was celebrated? Was this healthy? Was it toxic? But often we're reduced to one word. It was just normal with no understanding of it. So we want to go back and go, hey, no, it's okay to analyze and look at and actually encourage to go, how did that impact you? So do we have any questions on that? This is resonating with you? Yes, go ahead. Megan, then.
When you became aware of that which you were talking about, were you able to change it?
100%. You know, it's great to have a language for it, to even go, hey, when I got married, Monterey Bay, May 13th, 2005, and my wife's expression, she was like, all our pictures, huge smile, she's beautiful, she's just, it's her day, and every one of mine is like a very pained look. I felt like I could have been that guy breathing into the paper bag, like, I was sweating profusely, and something happened when I said I do, as I knew when I said I do, like it was on. I'm going to say I do, and it was on. So it was just freeing for me, but up until that moment, I thought, I could back out, I could screw this up, I could screw her up, what am I going to do? And these are real thoughts in my head, and I knew when I said I do, I would never back out of that. So I moved forward in that, and I don't know, it's just like a switch that went off. But it was also freeing to be able to talk about it and go, hey, and we even did a lot of premarital counseling where it's like, let's talk about these things that are broken and redeem them. That you don't have to live out your brokenness because we have Jesus in our life. He changes us and makes us into things that we are not on our own. And that's the power of the gospel and what God does in us. And my wife had her own version of brokenness, but we went back to 2 Corinthians time and time again that we were a new creation in him, right? So we're a new creation. I had to view her as the way that Jesus viewed her, as a new creation. She had to view me that way, and it became less and less personal because I understood that she's one of 7, that her traditions are off, that she doesn't want to talk, and it wasn't me she was running away from. It was just years and years of never talking. And so slowly we understood each other as we got more and more self-aware that those things were less threatening. You had a question in the back.
That's what I was going to say because of having both, whatever. But raising kids coming from no attachment at all, just through repeatedly doing healthy behavior.
Yes.
Has changed the brain, actually changed the brain.
Right.
And then, so I'm listening to this, and then I'm thinking, okay, the scripture says that we are transformed by the renewing of our mind.
Right.
As we read God's word.
Right.
It's changing our thinking.
For sure.
And so I don't know, I feel like, okay, once we're Christians, or if we're doing Christian parenting, right, we're now entering into the redemptive process of changing what has already been broken.
Yes. We're changing, but there's no guarantees in that. God doesn't guarantee that we won't suffer here on earth. There's no guarantee that we'll be lifted of any afflictions. What he guarantees is that we'll never do that alone. And some people are broken for a really long time. And some people are healed in different measures of that. But one of the things is that actually God works through our activity and often does not work through our inactivity. So if we're active, God works through that. But he also lets us run. He lets people run. He has pursued people at times, but he often just lets people run and just waits. But he works through our activity, and you actually have to pursue this quite a bit. If you had a marriage where you didn't do this, or even adopt a kid, you would tell them, no, you have to work through this to get here. I can see it, and it's completely different with God's redemption, but it also takes a ton of work.
Okay, so you just said, okay, so the redemptive work is doing the work.
Doing the work.
Is doing the work. It's
Correct.
Not just, you're not going to just heal.
Nope. God can do any miracle. Do we see that often in the Bible? I think about the miracles he did. There's only a handful of them. Most of the time, he didn't come to to heal everyone, really. And I think that's something that's important, is he wants to work through us. So I don't know, am I answering your question?
No, I was just, what I'm trying to get out of my head is it's looking secular, so I'm trying to put that into Christian thinking of redemption and how the Holy Spirit works and how he transforms us too. But of course, we're partnering. We're not just laying there, not thinking. So
Correct. Even think about your prayer. Think about David's prayer. It's a version of that. Now, you're also speaking to a counselor. I think in counselor speak, you're going to get a clinical talk. You're going to get clinical terms. So I get what you're saying. My wife is more on the spiritual side. We use different words for the exact same thing. But you're going to get a clinical talk from a clinical guy. Yes. I left a blank on the goal of this class. That's for you to fill out. I don't want to decide your goal. But if you're wondering, like, what is that? I want you to write it in real quick. Okay. So we all fall somewhere on the spectrum. So here's the next part of this. We all come from some sort of, especially these are the 5 child roles in dysfunctional families. You could find as many as 12. But one of the things you find is that most families, who has siblings? Okay, who has 2 siblings? Who has 3? 4? Okay, Ricardo does. 7. So here's what you will find is that in your family, you typically play a family role. Now, what would we classify typically? This isn't always the case, but the first child is typically what? There's no competition. So what's the oldest child known for, typically? Being spoiled, possibly, but what else? What's that, Jake? Achiever, yes. Are they responsible? There's a higher correlation with that. Not always the case. You are the experiment, sure. Typically, the first is known to be more responsible. The middle child is known for what? Trouble. Who's a middle child? I am, right? How about the last child? The baby. What are they known for? Your parents have had how many kids, and then you're there? Do you get the same thing that the first kid did? No. They're like, this is our last kid. Let him just do whatever the heck he wants, right? So what happens is we get into these different types of roles. So you have, when there's things like this in every family, roles you play. These are just not always the case, but typically you'll find a version of this. So you got the problem kid. This kid is acting out. And then you'll find the other people reacting in different ways around it. So you got the chief enabler, the protector of the family. This is often the person speaking into this, protecting this person, but also enabling at times. Don't talk to him that way. Hey, let me give you some money. I'll take care of you. You've got the mascot. This is the family clown, just screaming for what? Attention. You got the family hero. This is our oldest kid. This is the reliable one. I'll take care of the family. Can you think about at an early age when you start adapting that sort of mindset, how could that change you? Even as a kid, what happens? When you start thinking, I'm the protector of this family, what happens? You lose your child, is that what you said? You get parentified. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm the protector of the family. I'm now the man of this home. I wish Ricardo was in here for this part, because then you've got this. Here's the lost kid, right? He's got the tablet. They're just off doing the old thing. So what's important to know is that we actually play these roles well into adulthood. And you know what happens when we go to our family reunion? Subtly, we start to move into these roles. You'll go back to a little bit of your normal unless you're very self-aware. I'll find even my mom. We had this conversation. I was in Arizona. Actually, I had 3 family reunions this summer. I was in the middle of one, and I was in there, and I was trying to figure out something happened to my mom, and it was just frustrating me. I was like, what is happening here? And I realized just one little thing she said just reminded me so much of being a kid. And in that moment, in that family reunion, it was like right back, like I was back in junior high. I haven't lived with my mom since 15 years old. I'm 42. I was right back in that spot. So what happens if you're aware of the role you played in your family, you know why you did that. When you meet your family again, you hang out with them, guess what you don't need to do anymore? Play in the same role. Because that's not your role to play anymore. The role you can be is just to be. I don't need to be the hero anymore. People can fix their own problems. I'm not the lost kid anymore. I actually have some value. I'm equal. I don't need to feel like a black sheep. My sister, my youngest sister would say that. She felt like a black sheep as the youngest. She was the kind of lost kid. She doesn't need to prove herself anymore because she knows that that's not her role to play anymore. And so there's strength when you know what you played and then also you go, hey, I know that so well. I don't want to play that anymore. Because we play these things well into adulthood. Any questions on that? I have a slide on this because I could really nerd out on the subject, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. But these are all of those. The lost child. Let's just do one. The mascot, immature on the outside. This is what they're showing you. Oh, I can't even read. Okay. Immature, fragile. God, I can't read that. Hyperactive, distracting inside. And this is me. Fear, anxiety, insecurity. That's how it manifests itself. So if you're interested by this, if you want to learn more, look it up. Because we play these family types of roles, and we usually fall into one of these. Okay. 6 things to be aware of. The second one, old stories get told for a really long time. So these things are called narratives. Narratives were stories that were written when we were young, but often play into adulthood. They're written long ago, but they play into adulthood. I was meeting a few years back with a guy who was in his 70s, marriage counseling, and I had this interaction. Him and his wife were talking, and I said, hey, what do you hear her saying? And he said, I'm mean. I'm just a mean guy. And what struck me as odd is in that, that's not what she said at all. Right? So I tried again. Hey, okay, I get that you were thinking that, but what do you hear her saying? And he goes, I'm just a jerk. I'm just a jerk. And I went right back at it in my counselor fashion. I said, hey, I'm asking you just how are you, what are you hearing her say? And you seem to really camp out there a lot. He's like, yeah, I'm the worst. I said, I want to stop you for a moment because I want to understand what's going on. As we peeled back a layer after layer after a layer, what we found out is this guy into his 70s had a dad that never valued him and would call him stupid, said, you have no value, you're basically a waste of space in this house. And that narrative that was written early played out with this guy to the very day in his 70s that we met. And when I asked him and I set it up on a tee for him, what did you hear her say? You know what he pulled out? His narrative. I'm bad. I'm this. I'm that. And so it's important you could understand your narratives, things that played out in your childhood. Sometimes they're your roles or things. But you go, hey, how did that play out? What was the type of thing that I thought about myself early on? Because we could leave one relationship that had a strong narrative and bring that very narrative into the next relationship. I was hurt here. You're going to hurt me too, aren't you? And we apply that narrative to the next relationship. And it plays over and over and over again in relationship after relationship after relationship. So understanding the narratives, the stories that were either told to you or you told yourself early and how they impact you later in life. So is this making sense? Do you have any questions on this? Once you understand the narrative, guess what we get to write? A new narrative. I am such a fan of writing new chapters in our book. And no matter what the old chapters say, the old narratives, what are the new chapters you want to write? Because we get to write new chapters all the time. Do you have a question on that? Yes.
Okay, so you said the person would need to have a different narrative.
Yes.
What happened if, like you said, the problem repeats in different relationships because you keep carrying the old narrative?
Yes.
But what happened if in one of those relationships, the person tries to instill the new narrative? It's not going to be accepted unless the person who carried the narrative accepted, right?
Correct.
Decides to change, right? The narrative.
It.
How can the other person help in the situation so the narrative that is affecting the other person is not affecting the relationship?
Every part of me wants to open up to this entire group. I would even want to camp out on that question all night. For the sake of our time, here's what I'll say, is in your relationship, you could be one of three things. You could be a plate, a mirror, or a sponge. A plate, a mirror, a sponge. A sponge wants to soak up someone's problem. I want to soak it up. Diane, you said it earlier, it almost reminded me of that. Like, I'm going to soak up the issue. How could we not help someone? How can we not soak up that thing? How can we not help them? Correct? We want to be a plate. This is me. I want to put it all on this plate, just hand it to you. Here you go. Here's your answer. The best thing we could do is an excellent mirror. And just go, hey, how does this look to you? And just stay with someone. Reflections, those types of things. Empathy. What is this like for you? Ask great questions. Because you said a word, how do you instill it in them? And then you veered, you said, but you can't instill it in them. You can't help someone unless they're asking you for help. But if someone is asking for help, they've invited you in.
Right. I guess, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say, what I'm saying is that the only way that the person can change the narrative is that person. Nobody else can help change the narrative.
Down the road, can you think of even in being in a life group with a bunch of people and you invite a bunch of guys in, you're like, hey, I've lived this way a long time. I need advice. Does that person give you a wide open door to speak directly in? It can be. Like, I think so. Hey, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Absolutely. But if someone walks around oblivious to that and they've not asked you in, do you have a green light to speak into their life? No. They're not inviting you in, so they're not ready. But you could still be an excellent mirror, and you could still ask really great questions. Hey, what's that like for you? That seems like it would be frustrating at times. Is that frustrating? That's where you use your power of empathy? God, that seems like it would be really rough. Is that, how has that been? You help that person start putting those pieces together. You actually have impacted them. You had a question. Yeah, then they're not ready. And you can't work harder than anyone else because they're not doing the work and you're overcompensating. We create a massive imbalance, and then you burn out and crash. So if you're in a marriage where you're working twice as hard, I think it's even a question to ask yourself, are they ready? Are they willing? That may be something you meet with someone or start reading books and really learn how to do that well, but also waiting and not trying to move or not carry too much of someone else's load. And that does sound hard because it's clear to you, correct? You see it. Is this person married or not? Okay, if you're not married, I think you have your answer. If you're married, Bible's so clear about what he wants, just to fight for marriage. But if someone's not willing to change, isn't that hard? One of the best things you could do is to hold yourself in such a regard where I'm unwilling to attach myself to someone, to be yoked together with someone who doesn't want to be yoked the same way that I do. And someone who's willing to just, who's going to walk with you. It's so powerful when you have that, too. And someone wants to grow. I used this analogy this morning. It just hit me, is that when you get married, you graft with someone like a tree. And if that grafting, half of the tree is decaying, have you seen a tree that's half alive? And really, you graft with something that's willing to grow and strong and wants to produce a fruit. Because there's power in that. That's a working marriage that God can use. But if you choose to graft with someone that's dead or dying, then that's part of what you're saying I do to, is that sort of decay. And I think the time is to go, hey, this is going to hurt, but I'm going to save this for someone who's going to cherish it and walk with me in it and grow with me. That's powerful. I love even in all the counseling I do, the best counselor in my household is my wife. She's way better than I am. I love that she's always thinking about that, praying. She's got women she talks to because I'm forced to grow because she's growing all the time. I love that's the person raising my kids, my boys, because she is growing. And that is a tone that she often sets. And then I'll push her at other times because I'm trying to grow as well. But there's this desire to have God work in us and to help us grow together. And so that's powerful. But don't let go of that. What's that?
I wish I could have recorded what you just said.
I'll forget it. It's already gone out of my brain, too. You could ask me in 2 seconds. It's gone. So narratives, really. We could rewrite these. I love the thought of just even new chapters. Meg, yeah.
Yeah, before you go on, I was in that situation, and it took me a long time to make the break that I needed to get to
Yeah.
that place. And if I were there now, and if I had that help that I needed, how do you break away like that when you're so attached? I mean, it might be in a marriage that should have never happened, say, or
Yeah.
a relationship, but you get attached.
Yes.
And I guess you can be insecure to walk away. I don't know why, but what would you do?
Ooh.
Steps then?
This is an excellent question. I feel like I would want to do a breakout even on that.
Yeah.
Because it's so, that's the work I did for 6 years in domestic violence or abuse or even leaving dysfunctional relationships. You know, God's design in marriage is to attach, to literally bind you together. And so you can't do that well and then also sever. It feels like you're splitting because you are. We know even biologically in the brain, it's a severing because the hormones of attachment, there's a chemical change when you attach with someone else that literally binds you together. Yeah, again, I can nerd out real hard right now, and I will spare you, but I love this kind of stuff, so we should talk more. So, okay. Here's what I would say. Awareness of narratives allows us to revise incorrect data and rewrite new chapters. Philippians 4:8-9, I love this. Whatever's true, whatever's noble, what is right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. It's this idea that when we meditate on his words, that's what we do when we read the scriptures, when we pray, and we invite people in. He actually can change us and give us things that we wouldn't have on our own. I love to use Romans when we talk about be transformed by the renewing of our mind, that God wants to renew our mind. And so we can have a new focus and meditate on these things that are godly, that take us away from the things that have plagued us for a really long time. But in my household, that's one that I taught my kids, and it's near and dear to me, and that's probably the only one I have memorized. So there you go. Okay. I like how Lisa Turkhurst said it. You collect the dots, you connect the dots, and then you correct the dots. So part of the self-awareness is collect those dots. What happened? You start making connections. How did that impact you? And then you start correcting as you're moving forward. So narratives can stick with us a long time, but we can write new chapters, so there's hope in that. Okay. We all have triggers. That's the next one. Oh my goodness. So you're driving to Costco. You're getting braced for Costco madness. You have a list. You are going to enter this madness. You're driving on the 78. Someone is 5 feet from your bumper. You're in the slow lane because you're getting off the 78 to go to Costco. You go from worship and praise to, in my mind, I'm now rehearsing how I would kill you. Am I preaching in there? We have those things that sometimes you go from this to that because it hits a nerve. It's something, when pressed in the present, taps this strong highway of old memory and pain, and when pressed, it takes us to a strong feeling. Now, what happens in that next, typically, what could happen? Something get triggered, typically, what could happen if you get triggered? You get what? What's that emotion? Angry. So I'm angry. What are we focusing on in the moment here? The what? Okay, the trigger, the anger, right? We focus on the explosion. Most of the time, we spend most of our relational energy talking about the explosion. It's important to then start evaluating, no, let's talk about the triggers, because your trigger is your responsibility, not everyone else's. If you get triggered all the time, you could think that the world needs to not trigger me so much. Everyone just needs to take a driving course and we'd be all right, right? No, your trigger is your responsibility. Spend less time on the explosion and more time understanding the wiring and the intricacy of why that is triggering, because there's power in going, when you're on the 78 and you're going to Costco and someone's on your bumper, this is getting too real, and you go, you know what, I know this is my trigger and this gets me angry, and I am making a choice right now to understand it and not give way to it. Do you see the difference? I could just live out my trigger, or I could be understanding of how this triggers me because I've done my work, I have self-awareness, and because of that, I'm not triggered the same like I was before. Does that make sense? So know your trigger, because we all have triggers. If you don't think you have a trigger, you're lying to yourself. Oh my goodness. Let's do this real quick. Everyone stand up, shake it off. Some of you were past your sleep hour, correct? You're still here. I love that. I love Ricardo. You know, this is huge. This is part of loving on her, isn't it? I love it. I love that. You're here. It's late, but also, and here's the other thing. If you are married and you're here, give the other person props for being here with you, because this is late and some of you should be in bed. Don't fail to do that. Okay, are we good? Do you need to shake it out at all? Are you good? Anyone need to do this a little bit? We got to keep working. We got stuff to cover. We're going to go out of the bank. Okay, are we good? Let's move forward. We all have triggers. So real quick, yes?
Okay, so a trigger is something that causes you to get angry.
Could be.
Or, so sometimes that, or what else?
Defensive.
Okay.
Sad.
Okay. But what if, so the trigger is necessarily, I mean, what if the triggers are just bad?
If they're bad?
They're hurtful.
Yes.
Or something.
Why are they hurtful? Because what happens is, what's happening in the present? Someone cut me off. That's the triggering thing. Okay. But let's go back to Connor's narrative for a moment. And what is the real pain? Where is that? Let's follow that roadway all the way back to, take your pick. Why does it get to me that someone could be disrespectful to me? Speculate for a moment. Why would that be triggering to someone?
Okay, so you're a
Let's go back to Ricardo. Why would it be frustrating to have someone disrespect you? Michaela, help him out. Why would, or Jennifer? Is it Jennifer? Yeah. Okay. Why would it be frustrating?
Frustrating for me, definitely, when someone disrespects me. But I think because my mom, both my parents instilled in me that respect is very important.
Yes.
Like my mom would say, don't disrespect me, or my dad say, that. So I heard it so much in my growing up that respect for me is very important to me. So it
Sure.
makes me mad when someone disrespects me.
Sure. Corbell.
Could it be just how we grew up with siblings teasing each other, possibly not respecting each other?
One, how painful was that? So what we deal with is the thing that's above the surface, correct? Disrespect. You disrespected me. Guys do this, by the way. Guys get into fights over a dirty look. More so, women will say mean things to each other. Guys actually seen guys fist fight over a look. Because respect is so painful. Now, the look was the surface thing. The look was the trigger. But the real issue, why that look has significance, is this. Everything underneath the surface. And when you have this thing that has a lot of history, there's a lot of negative emotions stored up that's really easy to trigger, is it not? But we spend more time in the trigger than we do understanding the pain underneath the surface, and we need to inverse that. I've never done this, but it just popped in my head. This is not even possible, but this is what we're talking about. Here's the surface. Trigger is now below. We're not even talking about the trigger anymore. We're going to expose and talk about all the things underneath it and ask yourself, why was that so painful? Here's the question I want you to ask yourself. 0 to 10, how blank did this make me feel? Do I have a slide for this? Oh, okay. 0 to 10. It's a scaling question. 10 is frowny face. 0 is happy face. You got angry. Jake was driving today. He was going to Costco again. He loves Costco. He just loves the sample. That's lunch every single day. So he's at Costco. Someone cut him off, and he exploded. How angry did that make you feel when someone cut you off today, Jake? Be honest. 0 to 10. 10 is super high. 0 is low.
On a regular basis, close to a 0. If I'm in a mood, I'm feeling like a 3. How many is he going?
So it was a 3. It's pretty low. But not today. Jake was driving. It was a Ford Festiva. Pulled up to his Mustang and was like going to out-muscle you. You were just angry. Today you were a 9. You ever just a 9 on the road? Probably not Jake, but many of us. You're just angry. Now here's the question. In the scenario, what would be a range that would be like, okay, you're mad on the road. What would be like a safe range, our normal range where someone cut you off would be maybe acceptable range? What number? 6, 5, 3? I kind of like this, I feel like this is a good thing to aim for, Jake. But maybe even at a range here, maybe 3 to 5. So if you ask yourself, what number am I at right now? If I'm a 9, is that a normal? Is that in the normal range? Jake is a 9, and someone who he doesn't even know cut you off and you're following them? And you're going to say something to them? So if your emotion seems to be outside of the range of normal, you know something is off and needs to be inspected. Does that make sense? So if your reaction to something is extreme, you need to evaluate and ask that question is, hey, is this outside of what normal is? She says something to you and you go off. Or he says something and you leave. Well, does that seem to fall in a normal response? Because sometimes it's pretty clear, no, that seems a little extreme, and we know it's something we need to inspect. But typically, it's a trigger that got pressed, And we need to do better about flipping it upside down and discover all of this stuff instead of just fighting over the trigger for hours and hours and hours and not making any headway. And one thing, I'll just say, this is just an aside. If you are fighting just to prove a point, you're just wasting your time. If you really want to solve conflict, be aware of what you're doing, and it's powerful. My wife and I mean, we've come a long way. If you could see her running early on and me chasing after her and some of the things I would say, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's embarrassing. But now we will even say, hey, it seems like we're not making headway. Let's take a little break. That's some of the best things you could do, because when we're triggered, here's what happens to our brain. Cortisol starts coming in. You find this in adopted kids or foster kids that come from homes with a lot of conflict. They're used to it. So even when they're in school, they're not able to focus because they're waiting for a door to open and something to happen. When our mind is braced for some sort of conflict, we're using a fight or flight part of our brain. This is the most primitive thinking we have. This is caveman-like thinking. I'm either fleeing the situation or I'm going to fight, or sometimes we freeze. Do you think that's befitting of the situation? Almost never. The best thing we could do is let that emotion go down. We start using the creative part of our brain and go, this is the part of the brain that actually comes up with new solutions. This is the part of our brain that thinks, what's happening right here? What should be happening? Let me come up with something that solves things, not reacts as if I'm being attacked. Because the body doesn't differentiate. The mind is saying, attack, get out of here, or start fighting. And we spend so much time there that's just wasted time. Okay. Next thing. You are really good at some things. Be aware of this. Ephesians 2:10, we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. That you are designed with purpose. That he actually has intention, that there wasn't just a randomness about you. There's an amazing part about you. God wants to use you in your uniqueness to reach unique people. There's an acronym that Saddleback does, and I'll have a link at the bottom of this, but really it's called SHAPE, spiritual gifts. What are your spiritual gifts? So there's a whole list of these types of things. Actually, let me see. I think I have a slide for that. Yeah. So Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, Ephesians 4, 1 Peter 4, it talks about different types of spiritual gifts. Did you know that encouragement, if you're an encouraging person, that's a spiritual gift? Isn't that amazing? That God wants to work through that? It's incredible. Okay. So spiritual gifts is the SH is the heart. What or who are you passionate about? Dan, you're passionate about helping people. That's amazing. God wants to use that. What are your abilities? We can look at your past successes. These are all things we should be self-aware about. What am I really good at? What does the history of me tell me about me in terms of what I've been good at? And going back to those assessments I was telling you about with clients, oftentimes I'd sit down with someone and ask, what are your strengths? They couldn't give me one. So we'd spend time going, hey, what are you good at? We find these people were artistic. They'd have poetry, they'd have art, they would draw, they would paint. It was mostly women. But we found even just spending time as they started to learn their strengths, and there was this confidence that came out of it. Abilities, your personality. Our personality allows us to reach unique people because no one has your personality except for you. But your personality is something that God wants to use. There's a design there. An experience, what have you gone through? So knowing all of these things, how they've impacted you, there's actually a lot of value in this. All of these things could be used by God. Okay. Next, your blind spots. What are your blind spots? Okay. Things you don't see in yourself. So, Ricardo, what are your blind spots? Just stop right there. That perfectly illustrated it. We don't know. There are blind spots. We don't know our blind spots. So what do you do if you don't know your blind spot? You got to ask someone, what am I not seeing? This is an introspective question, right? We talked about earlier, like, what if they don't say, hey, what are my blind spots? What don't I see? I ask this question to my wife all the time and ask, hey, what do you need more of from me? The first time I asked that question wasn't that long ago, to tell you the truth. I would ask in different ways, but I was a little afraid of what she was going to say. Not sad. Now I ask it all the time. We'll sit and like, hey, what do you need more of from me? And it's so nice because it's a blind spot. It's something she's seeing, something she's needing, and allows her to speak in. I'm like, oh, now I know. It's not blind spot anymore. Woohoo! But we need people to speak in. Okay, this next thing in terms of self-awareness, how do I come across to other people? Okay, can I ask a little bit of grace in this next section? I'm just going to prep you. I'm going to show you some pictures. We're going to look at a few people. We're going to start judging people for the sake of analyzing, okay? Kristen Stewart. Anyone recognize her? What do you recognize her from? Twilight. What do you get from her face right now? She's upset. She doesn't approve. What do you two think? What do you think about Kristen Stewart right now? We're playfully judging her to make a point. Go ahead. What do you think?
I think it's more like an arrogant.
Ooh, arrogant. I'm above you. What else? Huh?
Looks like she's checked out.
Checked out. She's so stuck up. She thinks she's better than everyone else. She's mean. Really, here's what we don't know. Did I lock the front door when I left today? Now, here's a phenomenon. And it's perception versus reality. How we perceive ourselves versus how others perceive us. It's things like this. How I thought my hair would look when I parted in the middle. How it actually looked. This is how I feel after the gym. This may be how I look. Cutting my bangs. This is kind of how I feel, right? Okay, I cried in my office when I saw this. So I walked in like, why are you crying? I'm like, I can't really explain why I'm crying. Anyway, I'm a weirdo. Okay, so the thing is, do you know how people perceive you? I had an interview 4 years ago with someone who's come on board at our church to be an amazing admin. And we sat down. She had this blank look on her face. I thought, oh, this isn't good. No drive, no passion. She looks kind of mean. Could I see myself working with her? She looks like she's checked out. Maybe a little arrogant. I added that just to bring you back in. But she just, I don't know if I connect with her. And then she said something, she taught me something in the interview. And she, in a moment of candidness, she said, I realize that I have RBF. And I'm like, what does that even, what do you mean? Is it, the counselor brain is like, what is that in the manual? Is it a term? She's like, RBF. She's like resting B face. And we could say butt face. But it's a cultural term. But the thing I had to look up, and I just cracked up, is that she knew about herself that her resting face was saying a lot without saying any words at all. Do you know you communicate all day long? Do you know what you're communicating to people? What's that? What you're thinking? Do you know that when we don't say anything, people fill in narratives about what they think we're thinking? The best thing and part of self-awareness is I know what you could be thinking about me because I just asked you or we talk about it. Or even I'm self-aware, I pursue this. And when I do, I can compensate. If I'm self-aware, I can actually make tweaks where I can tone things down or turn them up or compensate where now I'm not doing this all the time. I'm actually smiling a little bit. Imagine that. Do you know when you all walked in and sat down, most of you had more of just a stoic face? Do you know that? I was a little intimidated. Oh my gosh. This is going to be rough. Oh man, what if I don't like the class? Now, were you thinking that coming in at 7 o'clock today?
Oh, yeah.
Ryan was. Icebreakers. That's why I was like, go to your icebreaker, go to your icebreaker.
My husband was happy with the snacks.
He was happy with that?
He said, I like the class.
Oh yeah, the snacks are how we won him over. But if you know yourself well enough, you could ask that question, hey, how do I come off? What do you think? Ask a friend. Hey, because I really don't want to come off that way. Or you could start filling in the narrative. And maybe when you're silent, you come across as you're angry, but when you start talking, you actually are warm because you can compensate for it. 2 years ago in school ministry, it's a school we teach here, we had this conversation, and one of the kids, we had him come up to the front of the class, and in a real moment of honesty, it was determined like, hey, your resting face is just kind of off. Like, what happened? Is there a scent? And what was amazing is for 2 years, actually 3 years, I just saw this kid last month. I saw him, it was like this. He saw me and he went, boom. He will never forget that lesson. But when we're self-aware, we understand how we come across. Do you come across mean? Do you come across open? Do you come across caring? Are you empathic? Are you cold? Maybe Jake's dreaming up some sort of creativity, or maybe he's doing a deeper meaning. But Michaela's like, God, he's not interested. He doesn't want to hear my heart. Do you understand what that sounds like? And when you know, or even think of, I need to be aware of how people perceive me, it's freeing because I can move towards it. Because oftentimes the narrative is so different than the truth, is it not? Okay, barriers to self-awareness, limited or biased feedback. Actually, I have all kinds of feedback. I went to my mom, I went to my sister, and I went to my aunt. Is that biased? What is the other relationship here? All family. Is this a little biased? Is this a little skewed? So one of the barriers to self-awareness is biased feedback or limited feedback. Who's allowed to speak into your life? Oh boy. Good Lord. Okay, I'm going to tell you what this video is because we're out of time. We're getting there. We got 10 minutes. They did a study, one group of kids, 2 batches of brownies, a good batch, and then a batch that they make with salt. They sit down, they have the kids taste test. One is brownies and the other is grandma's secret recipe of brownies. And in the secret recipe of brownies, they give the kid $1. The secret recipe has salt in it. There are 6 kids. They all try the normal good brownies, the salty brownies at the end. And they ask them, hey, honestly, what was your favorite brownie? Every single kid points to the salted ones. At the end of the experiment, the kid goes out to the hall with a salty brownie. He's like, hey, do you want another brownie? None of the kids take them. They're like, oh, gosh. None of those kids wanted to be honest. And one of the hard parts is sometimes our default is we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So as a gift and even a pursuit on the other end to get honest people speaking in your life who are not afraid to speak the truth but also do it in love. Because we know that we're oftentimes not very different. We don't want to cause waves. It can be very hard to speak truthfully to someone. Okay, avoidance. We just don't want to know the truth. I don't want to know the truth. The truth hurts, right? So we may avoid it. Next one. Oh, confirmation bias. You don't think I'm mean, right? You don't think I'm mean, right? Right? You do not think I'm mean, right? Right? I mean, like, she's saying this, she's so dumb, right? Like, right? 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 I mean, isn't she so off, right? Right? Like we have an idea and we want to move towards what we want to be true, oftentimes more than what's actually true. We have our own biases. So we often pursue things that align with what we want to be true more so than what's actually true. I'm not mean. You know who's mean? She is mean, right? You don't think she's mean? Okay, forget you. But she's mean, right? She's mean. Ryan's the best. He totally gets me. He understands because she's mean, right? Okay, forget you. But she's mean, right? Did you see how she did? Do you know what she did? And I skew whatever she did, right? Yeah, right? I know. Can you believe she did that? She's the worst. You totally get me. Michaela's out. She doesn't get me. She's just not rocking with the confirmation, right? We have our own bias. So we like to find people that want to go with our narrative of things. And one of the best things you could do is find people that are living the type of life you want to live, that have the type of marriage you want to have, that have the type of relationship with God that you want to have. Ask them and say, hey, will you speak truthfully into this? Will you do that? Because I want the truth. I don't want to bias you, and I can't just go along with the narrative I want. I actually want a real narrative, because you could cut off your growth so early. Any questions on that? Okay, good, because we don't have time for your questions. And then, so that could be, last one is denial, projection. It's not me, it's the other person. Defensiveness or over-acceptance. You start taking on the things of other people like maybe a codependent does or an enabler. Okay, how to be more self-aware. The first, we talked about earlier in the scaling question, but also asking, hey, how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling right now? Do you know when you give yourself even 5 seconds when you're angry, you actually lower your amount of anxiety and frustration and allow yourself to think more creatively? How am I feeling right now? Do some sort of scan. Instead of focus on what she's doing or what he's doing or what's going on, but how am I feeling right now? Or how blank am I feeling right now? Does that seem to fit my current situation? The next one is going to be a little of a kind of a morbid thought, but bear with me for a moment. And that's an autopsy. In counseling, there are no wasted interactions ever. If a couple has a major fight and they just want to move on, it feels like a dead body. Something died. It was a horrible crash and burn. It was a failure. I often want to sift through the ashes to get key pieces of information. And so if there's something that feels disastrous or if it didn't work right, I want you to do an autopsy. Or I want you to sift through ashes and go, hey, what can we take out of this? What can we find? Because if we don't do that, guess what happened? It was just a complete waste. So if there was some sort of interaction with person, if there was a fight, if there was a conflict, if something blew up, if you acted a way you don't want to do, if you feel horrible, we don't want to move on. We actually want to go back to it when we're calm and go, hey, what can I learn from this? Because we can learn a lot about ourselves and some of our biggest failures. Amen? No wasted information. We unpack all of that in a better time when we have better understanding. And oftentimes we find pieces that make us more self-aware. You know what I'm self-aware of? Very early on in my Christianity, I'm walking down to Balboa Park. There's a guy there on a box. He's got a megaphone. He's got a sign. He's yelling at people. I'm like, oh, okay, the sign says something about God. I'm like, I'm going to go change this guy's heart, right? Because that's my heart. I'm going to change his heart. He's yelling, you're going to hell. And I'm like, you know what? All these people here, you know what you and I should do? We should pray for them together right now. Let's pray. Will you be willing to pray for me? He's like, oh, you want to come in here? And he goes closer to me. You want to come in here? I'm going towards Ryan. I don't know. He could punch you right now. He's like, you want to come in here and just like, oh, la-dee-da. No, God made a whip, and he cleared the temple with it, and he sends people to hell. And he did this, and something snapped, got triggered. And all of a sudden, I went from here to this. And we were so close in that my wife's pulling me back. I started with heart, did I not? Let's pray for everyone. A minute later, I'm in the face of some guy in the name of the Lord, and we're about to throw down and show people what real Christians look like, right? Like we're going to fight each other, and somehow that's going to win people over to the kingdom. That was a crash and burn. You know what a rule for me is? That guy in the box, I'm not allowed to go within a certain radius because something in me wants to go cray-cray on him. The injustice of that, and that sometimes that's not as negative as my interaction, but it happens when there's a severe untruth being preached very loud because my heart is for people and my heart is for the Lord, right? I want people to know truth. So if someone's being deceitful, they're lying, or they're going at an angle that I feel is unbiblical, there's a part of me that just wants to go off. Now, my wife's like, remember our thing. I'm like, that's right. I'll look at, but I steer clear. But part of it was doing an autopsy, because in that moment, I crashed and burned. I failed. But the redemption is I learned about myself in that. That's just not a good scenario for me. I'm a nut. There's parts of me that I'm still working on even today. And that's one of them. And so I've learned that just by sifting through ashes and going, that ain't going to work for me. This piece right here is so important, I don't want to throw it away. I actually want to learn from it. And the last is do a mission brief. You invite people in, spend time in a failed situation or even something didn't go right. Don't pick biased people, pick wise people and go, hey, this didn't go well and I really want to understand it. I want to do this different. Would you be willing to sit down with me and help me understand this differently? And in doing so and pursuing that, you will leave self-aware. Early on, I talked about the bread example at Macaroni Grill. You taught me something. You taught me something. You taught me something. You taught me something, right? I opened that up. You all spoke in a way that was very enlightening about a woman's perspective about a comment that to me at the time felt like a rational thing. But when you invited people in, do a brief about a situation, you actually get a lot of new feedback, which helps you move forward different. I'm going to be true to our time. It's 9 o'clock, y'all. Pardon me. I'll tell you what. I appreciated this time with you. If there was something you didn't get to, or if you're like, hey, I didn't get to this, or hey, what about this? Or maybe I want to practice what I'm preaching, and that if there's a miss on my part, or a crash and burn, or a failure, pursue it. Let me know. Simple. I'll write my email right here. Email me if you want. Here's my caveat, is that I'm wearing many hats here, and sometimes my hats are, I'm trying to switch out, so I may not get to this right away if it's not like life or death, but I will get back to you. So if you do have a question, or if you're like, hey, this offended me, man, would I want to know that? And I think that would be important. So Connor, there you go, at northcoastchurch.com. And let me just thank you, last part, thanks for coming. Thanks for being willing to be with me on this Monday night at 9 o'clock. That is cool.
And it's vacation time, right?
And what?
And this is summer.
And summer. You could be asleep right now. You could be watching something really amazing on Netflix that would, I don't know, it's a dumb thought. Wouldn't do you any good at all was what I was thinking. But listen, it says a lot about you. I hope that you keep on this pursuit. Remember, God wants to work in you. We didn't become a Christian and then we're a completed package. He actually wants us to become more like him. He wants to refine us. He wants to do a work in us, which means that he is always going to be working even to our last day, because we don't sign up to be a Christian or retire. And so part of that is being so aware of even what is God doing in you. God, seek out my heart, my thoughts. Can you refine me? I need to be refined not just once a year, but sometimes every single day. And so am I willing to ask those hard questions? Am I willing to invite God in to pray in a way that he can work in me and through me, because I'm always seeking his shaping, his refinement? And another word I would use for that is self-awareness, that I am seeking to understand in a way that allows God to move forward, not the way that I want to naturally, but in a divine way that is so much better. Amen? I'm going to pray, because that's how pastors close out classes like this. I'll stick around for a little bit, and then, hey, so good hanging with you for this time. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay. Oh, stop. Let's pray. Lord God, we just pray that you would refine all of us so we could be useful to you. What a blessing, Lord, that we don't have to be stuck, but you can change us, help us to grow, help us to constantly learn more about you, that you could be refining us daily, that we could become holy and we could have holy relationships. We could understand how you would have us walk here on earth, and then also that you would prepare us to be with you, Lord, through everything we go through. We thank you, God. We love you. Thanks for dwelling with us. You attend classes with us. You walk with us. You dwell with us, and you live inside of us. And because of that, we are changed. We're all changed because of your work in our life. And we love you. Amen. Okay, have a good night. Drive safe. Remember, there are some unself-aware people on the road who are maybe ready to go cray-cray, so don't do anything weird.